Thursday night, the New York Rangers managed to pull off a pretty wild 9-goal win against the New York Islanders, but unfortunately, that win with those 2 points that the Rangers got is almost kind of meaningless at this point with where this team is at and how far back they are of the Montreal Canadiens of that second wildcard spot. And, they're still in the mix battling with other teams as well who are on the outside. So it is definitely looking very, very likely that the New York Rangers will not be making playoffs this year. And with that being said, we're going to take a look at some of the reasons kind of why this team did take that big step back from last season there after being, that President's Trophy winning team there, being the best team in the entire regular season in the NHL. This team obviously went on to their second of the last 3 Eastern Conference Finals, which is another pretty good mark there. So you're the best team in the regular season there. You make it 2 of the last Eastern Conference Finals. So going into this season there, there definitely were some pretty high hopes, or at least some hopes of this team, at least at minimum, being a playoff caliber team. And unfortunately, we have not seen that this season there, and it's not looking like they're going to be a playoff team either. So we're going to kind of take a look at some of the reasons kind of why this team did take such big steps back from last season there, and kind of take a look at specific kind of categories and areas on where this team did take those actual steps back, because it is pretty clear that this team, although, on paper may not be a whole lot different, at least from the start of the season there, obviously we have seen quite a few different trades happen over the last few months now throughout this season. But at the beginning of this season, going into this season there, other than Barclay Gaudreau and adding in Riley Smith and adding in Sam Carrick on the fourth line, there weren't a ton of different kind of big changes to this roster there. You had a nice kind of young guy on the back end there playing a few games to begin the season there in Victor Mancini, but other than those few players, nothing really major changed with this roster. So I did kind of think and kind of hope, although I didn't love the moves and kind of the lack of moves that happened this offseason there, I still thought this team could be a true kind of playoff caliber team. Obviously, it has not happened there, and there have been many reasons kind of why this team has taken those steps back. And I do expect some pretty major changes in this upcoming offseason with the firing of the coaching staff and, of course, head coach Peter Laviolette. I definitely hope this team goes in a different direction there. And although, like I said in past videos, I don't fully blame all of it, let's say on Peter Laviolette. He's definitely for sure to blame, absolutely, but I think it's definitely not all his fault there. It's unfortunate kind of what's going on here. This team definitely has more talent than kind of what they've shown, but taking a look at some of the areas that this team kind of took some steps back in from last season, though, and taking a look at some actual stats. And first off here, I think it's pretty obvious. The goals for and against, it's a pretty big difference from last season when you take a look at things there. It's not maybe as an insane drop-off as many people might think, but it is still a pretty decent-sized drop-off there, going from 7th in goals for and against last season there. So in the entire NHL, for the best teams goal for-wise and goals against, so the least goals against, the most goals for, the Rangers were 7th place in each of those categories. Now this season, they are 12th in goals compared to 7th last season, and tied for 13th in goals against compared to 7th last season. So that is definitely a decent sized drop off. Not a major one, not a massive one, and not one as kind of large as some people might think, but it definitely is still a decent sized step back. And now you take a look at an area where this team took an incredibly massive step back, and it really is honestly just kind of insane how big of a step back and how much worse they got in this category, and that is special teams, and more so the power play, which has just been, honestly, it actually is kind of funny how bad this power play has been this season. And it's not funny like haha, it's kind of funny, sad almost, with how bad this power play has been for this Rangers team. And as of late, over the last few weeks, it has just been completely abysmal. You take a look at things here. Last season for the power play, the Rangers had the 3rd best power play in the entire NHL. They've been a team for pretty much season after season. They've had, one of the better power plays in the entire NHL. So last season they were 3rd for power play percentage. This season, they are 27th in the entire NHL. They went from 3rd place last season to 27th on the power play this season there. That is an absolute joke, and it's pretty wild how they took that big of a step back. It's not like they just went from top of the league there in 3rd place, one of the top teams there, to kind of middle of the pack, though, or even kind of, the back end of the middle there around that, maybe let's say 15 to kind of 20 range. No. They're way back there in 27th place in the entire NHL. That is just such a major step back, and honestly is pretty wild to see. You take a look at the penalty kill percentage as well, and that took a decent sized step back as well, being 3rd place in the entire NHL last season there to tied for 11th this season, which this thing has kind of been a pretty big advantage for the Rangers, where they have had a very good special teams power play and penalty kill for the last kind of while now. And that's been one of their kind of, big keys to their game. And this team's kind of overall kind of play is the special teams there. They've been known to be a great power play and a penalty kill team, and have been known to kind of rely on their power play way too much. And maybe that is a much bigger kind of reason than some of us may realize this season there, with taking that major step back in the power play. That has definitely been the reason where this team has lost a lot of their goals from last season. They're not being able to produce on the power play. So I definitely think that may be coming around this season there, to where now this team isn't able to score those power play goals. So it is kind of showing up even more compared to normal, which it definitely makes sense, and kind of why this team didn't obviously make playoffs more than likely. I mean, unless something absolutely drastically insane happens here, this team is not making playoffs, and a big reason for that is the lack of power play goals, and obviously the PK there not being nearly as good is definitely quite hurtful as well. And then you take a look there, for shots allowed, obviously you don't want to be high up there, and last season there the Rangers were 23rd, so that's kind of good that you want to be near the bottom there. That's for the least amount of shots, being like that 32nd spot there. The Rangers this season were tied for 5th, so obviously not great there, being 23rd last season there, going all the way up to tied for 5th with the most shots allowed per game on average. That's not good at all there. So I think in general, it's pretty obvious there that the goals for and against is a pretty major kind of reason why there. Obviously, it's not that crazy of a drop-off, 7th to 12th, and 7th to tied for 13th. It's not that big of a drop-off, but it definitely is a decent-sized one. And then you also consider, though, the power play and penalty kill. That is a huge step back, especially on the power play side of things there, going from 3rd to 27th. So I think that has definitely played a pretty major role in this team's kind of, lack of success this season there. And you also take a look at the shots allowed, which, of course, that's just not great there, being, tied for top 5 in the entire NHL for shots allowed per game. So I think overall, sadly, it's not just kind of one area that I would say, is the reason for this team taking a step back in. I think you could definitely blame the offense, the defense, the transition game there, the kind of breakout passes, the lack of kind of strength, energy from this team at moments there. I mean, there are a lot of different kind of things you could kind of blame for the lack of success this season from this Rangers team. So it's definitely unfortunate there. I am hopeful that this team will turn things around going forward, but there obviously need to be some pretty big moves and kind of changes made in this upcoming offseason there. I think it starts with firing Peter Laviolette and potentially trading away guys like Keandre Miller and Chris Kreider. But I think this team definitely has some solid foundational pieces there. And I think, adding a guy like JT Miller, that was a pretty smart move there, especially with knowing, Filipino's kind of concussion problems and stuff like that, with him already, having some of those, problems there with the Canucks there, and obviously missing the rest of this season and missing quite some time so far. So I think that was a good move there and a step in the right direction. The Borkin move may end up being okay for this team. We'll have to wait and see how Kakko turns out and how those picks turn out there, being 3rd and 6th, and what the Rangers can do with those. But I think in general, this team has made some solid moves. It's just about kind of making some more good moves there, filling out the rest of this roster around this kind of core and building it the right way. And I think adding in some more kind of grit and toughness is a must, but also adding in some really solid, kind of sturdy defensive defensemen is also a big need, as well as getting in a really good new coach there with probably a different defensive system is probably what's best for this team. But anyways, thank you all so much for watching today's video. If you have enjoyed, definitely don't forget to click that like and subscribe button for daily New York Rangers content, as I do post every single day. And also, definitely don't forget to comment down below your thoughts on the New York Rangers, kind of taking some pretty big steps back in multiple areas of their game. Goals for, goals against, power play, PK, shots allowed. Most areas of Rangers game, it feels like they've kind of taken some steps back in. So let me know your thoughts on that. I'll catch you next one, and let's go Rangers.